both. Let's go live. Alrighty. And we are live. Let me just check on LinkedIn how we are doing before we start off. Just a moment. Alrighty. We are a bit frozen, but other than that, we are fine. Cleo, I need to mute this. So I'm going to start the counter, after which we are going to start off.
Good.
Alrighty. Alrighty, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Noelin Mumbi. I am a supply chain professional and the Safe Space host. Safe Space is an open and free forum for us to gather and share here on LinkedIn, to be seen, to be heard, and to be cared for. It's a safe environment to share our personal feelings, our experiences without judgment or retaliation. And it is also a place to learn. So as we go on with the live, if you have any questions for our guest or for myself, please do send them through DM directly and I will ask for you. This evening, we shall be speaking on what it means to be a people-first organization, the future of work, and people science. I am thrilled to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Clif Lewis, who is going to be leading the conversation today. Dr. Clif is all about the future of work and creating people-first organizations. A big part of what Dr. Clif does involves helping clients to let go of family-held assumptions about what work is, and this gives us a false sense of security, but it ultimately holds the organization and individuals back from reaching their full potential. Dr. Cliff's approach is evidence-based, using credible people science to replace the old ways of working with people that simply are no longer compatible with the new realities within which businesses have to operate. Dr. Cliff enjoys working with entrepreneurs and the firms that fund them, who want to make the world a better place through their products and their services. Dr. Cliff holds a PhD from the School of Business and Management at Queen Mary University of London. He is registered as an industrial and organizational psychologist in South Africa and the UK, as well as accredited as a chartered HR professional. Dr. Cliff teaches leadership, DEI, people analytics, research methods, wellness, and labor law, among others, and collaborates with researchers in psychology, business, and law in Africa, the Middle East, and Europe. Welcome to Safe Space, Dr. Cliff, and thank you so much for agreeing to join us today. Thank you.
Hello, Noel. Wow. Thank you for that very generous introduction. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us and for making the time. I know it's almost not working hours where you are, but thank you for making the time.
You're
So
very
I'll just
welcome.
thank you, straight into it. I've been following your content on LinkedIn for a while. You've done quite a number of videos on the future of work, psychology, wellness, well-being, people science. And maybe you could start us off by sharing with the audience, where is this passion coming from? What is fueling this passion to create content, educative content on LinkedIn?
Well, excuse me, I don't know where this frog in my throat suddenly came from. Perhaps I can start with sort of just sketching my career for you. So I chose a career and a path that is very much office based, so working corporate, working in an office setting, putting on your trousers and your suit, tie, whatever it might be. And not very long into my career, I realized that I don't want to work like this. Um, and then I've pursued various different avenues or zigzags, I suppose, in an attempt to escape the inevitable. And then the pandemic hit, and everything kind of got turned on its head. And I think the main driving force, so it was a New Year's resolution for me to do more content, because I've dabbled with it a few times, but I never remained consistent. This is the first time I'm as consistent. I know that other people in traditional, conventional office jobs also experience what I've experienced, in that you wake up every day and you just dread the majority of your day. And we work we work for the majority of our waking hours. Most people do. And it's just wild to me that just hating your life has become so normalized. And so I produce content, and I try to reach out to as many people and organizations and decision makers in organizations that I can, because, as I said, I know other people experience the same. And I don't think it's necessary. I think the pandemic has showed us that we can do things differently. And in fact, we have to do things differently. And we can make work more human centric, because, as you mentioned in that very generous introduction, we've got all of these assumptions around um, how things have to work and how things have to be, that just simply aren't true. It gives us a false sense of security at best. And so I suppose that's, oh, and then the other thing that I wanted to mention as well is, as an academic, I wear an academic hat as well. I'm also very passionate about, I don't like that expression, but I feel very strongly about democratizing knowledge. So much of the research that we do as academics are behind various walls that the average individual literally can't access, because they don't have access. But even if they do have access, the work is presented in a way that, if you aren't literally an expert in the field, you won't understand what it's about. So that's also, I really want to make, because there's so much misinformation and disinformation. And I think if people just had access to the truth and to evidence, the world would be a better place. So I don't know if that long-winded explanation answered your question.
It did, Dr. Cliff, it did. Thank you. Thank you for sharing where the passion is coming from. And as you're sharing all this information, because I look at your videos and I see you pointing out to papers that have been written, and you speak a lot about people first organization. So could you explain, what does it mean to be a people first organization?
Sure. So a lot of organizations claim to be people first, but I hate to be the bearer of bad news. They probably aren't, because being a people first organization is actually a very radical notion, um, because it literally means whenever you do anything, whenever you make a decision, whenever there's a big change, whenever you decide on the future and you develop strategy, people has to be the first consideration. And a lot of organizations that say they are people first has got all kinds of nice little things sprinkled into the employee experience, like all kinds of perks and incentives, but they aren't the first thing that is considered when they develop strategy, when products are developed, when services are developed, when all of the different things that happen in organizations. So high level, people are the first thing that we consider. Now, what does that look like in practice? There's various different models that you can follow, or frameworks that you can follow, to work towards achieving a people first organization, because it's also not a destination. There's too many moving parts. The context changes, politics change, regulation change, people's preferences change, the the composition of the labor market changes. So being people first is a continuous process. And so I think I recently posted something that said a good place to start if you want to be a people first organization is to create meaningful work. So work is designed in a very intentional way to make it meaningful. We don't just decide, okay, well, these reports needs to be done. So, okay, so we're going to just give this to one person and that's going to be their job without thinking of what the experience of doing those report will be like for the person. So creating meaningful work, focusing on organizational networks, so social networks within organizations, focusing on those rather than hierarchies and reporting lines. What was the other one? Oh, collaboration. In Western organizations, we're all about the competition. So people competing against each other, departments competing against each other, organizations competing against each other, focusing on collaboration rather than the competition and wellness. There's this sort of dichotomy around wellness versus productivity. But you can't have one without the other. If you don't have a job, you can't eat, you can't live. So, you can't have wellness. But if you're not well, you can't work. So prioritizing wellness in that as well. So that's one way in which you can work towards being a people first organization. But essentially, it all starts with people.
Oh, okay. So you've mentioned 4 ways that. So would you be able to just unpack them, starting with meaningful work? What would be the definition of meaningful work or a standard way of defining it?
Okay, so there isn't a standard way of defining it, but there are multiple avenues that you can pursue. So there's one. I forget the name of the authors, but there's one model that looks at 4 different pathways of achieving meaningful work, and I'm probably going to forget some of them now. But one is unification. So does the work assist the person doing the work with being in touch with themselves? So, what is important for them, what they want to achieve, what they assign value to. Then the other one is collaboration. So does the work allow the person to interact with others? Then I forget the names of the other ones, but the one transcends the work itself. So when I do this work, do I feel like I'm doing it because I'm part of something bigger? And there's another one that I forget. But so this one, and if you watch my videos, you'll probably see it. But there's these 4 pathways, and if work activates more than one pathway at a time, it's more likely that the person is going to find the work meaningful. Then there's another model that says that meaningful work is in touch with values, the values of the person. It allows for collaboration. So collaboration is like a key indicator. Transcends the self, connects with the environment. Work is meaningless when it's detached from values. If it exposes someone to psychological or physical harm, if there's no sense of, I forget the actual wording, but it says it overrides better judgment. So it's like my boss is asking me to do these tasks, but there's a much better way of doing it. So overriding better judgment. There's a whole bunch. And then there's also some assessments that you can actually do. There's a work as meaning inventory, I think I speak in some of my content of, where you can literally give this person this assessment to do, and you can periodically do this. It's a very short assessment. I think it's like 10 items. And you can, if you're really a people first organization, you can design work using all of these frameworks. And then because there's so many moving parts, as time goes by, you can periodically do a diagnostic and have people complete these assessments to see, is the work in our organization still being considered or experienced as being meaningful? Because it's also a very subjective experience. So there's that as well.
As you're speaking, I'm also looking at some of the videos that you have done. And for the audience, if you'd like to connect with Dr. Cliff on his page, the links to what he's speaking about, what is being people fast, the 4 ways to be people fast, I will post them in the comment section of this live session. And you can follow him on his page and follow his videos. They are usually very short, 2 to 3 minutes maximum, but you get all of that information. Compact research has been done, and he will get all that information from his page. Thank you, Dr. Cliff, for sharing
I
that.
try. Thank you, Noel. And if anyone has, I also invite viewers to please comment. I don't know everything, and especially with the future of work, we're learning as we go along. No one really knows. No one is really an expert in the future of work because it's still emerging. So if anyone who's part of the call or watches my videos, please feel free to share your own views and your own experiences as well. It helps me produce better content.
Thank you. You're very humble, Dr. Cliff. Even with all the research that you've done, and you keep showing us this paper over here and this paper over here. But thank you for sharing all this information. So, having listened to you, Dr. Cliff, explaining what people first organizations are, how organizations can be people first, let's bring it down or cascade it down to people leadership in the organization. So, for the people who are watching us live right now or who will catch up with the recording later and they are team leaders, supervisors, or managers, and they're thinking, okay, this is good information, but how do I, as an individual, how do I, as a team leader and a manager, become a people first leader? What advice do you have for them?
Well, first things first is you need to realize that being a leader is a thankless job. So if you are pursuing leadership roles, excuse me, if you have been in a leadership role for a while, you have to realize that if you want praise and thanks and appreciation, leadership in organizations is not the place to get that. If you want to be a leader in a people first organization, if you want to create people first organizations, the work itself needs to be fulfilling enough and should be enough for you. And I say that because I literally published a LinkedIn article today. Reasons why people hate their work, hate their jobs. And one of them was managerialism. And managerialism is an ideology that is so intertwined with organizations and Western society in general, where there's this assumption that if there isn't a leader or a manager in place who who's steering the ship, and now immediately see I'm going into metaphors. I need to stop myself and actually use my real words. Then everything is going to fall apart. And that's not compatible with the future of work anymore. The future of work is collaborative. The future of work does not assume that the leader knows everything or knows best even, but that the leader should act as a facilitator, not as a instructor, but as a facilitator of collaboration, making sure that everyone has a voice, making sure that people are understood, and distilling the best of what their teams can offer, and to make sure that people stay at the center. It is so easy to start with being a people first leader, and then pressure happens or setbacks happen, and it just goes out the window, and we start focusing on KPIs and policy and shareholder value. And it's so strange to me when this actually happens, although I completely understand why it happens, and I've been in leadership roles where it's happened to me as well. But I suppose hindsight is 2020, because there is no organization without people. Organizations don't, the way that we talk about organizations, They don't exist. It's this abstract thing that we've created in our mind. Organizations don't exist without people. And the fact that since the industrial revolution, we've worked in corporate roles and in organizations as if organizations are this objective entity that exists outside of human thought, and it's not. It is people, and that's become a kind of a cliche, but if you think about it, that's really what it is. And yeah, I've already rambled too much. That's what it means to be a people first leader.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. What I'm getting, Dr. Cliff, is people first. Whatever you're doing, whatever decisions that you're making, think about it from the people, the individual, the human first. Alrighty. So
Yes.
you have spoken a bit about, not a bit actually, you've explained it categorically and said organizations do not exist without the people in them. And
Mm,
a little on, we're going to speak about the coexistence, if we could call it that, of technology and people at work. And that brings us to the next question that I wanted to ask about. What is the future of work? We've seen the advent of AI and all these other wonderful things we think are coming with AI and with different work cultures. But based on your research, what is the
mm.
future of work?
So I'm still formulating that. I'm still planning on what to say about that, because what I'm seeing a lot of is a lot of talk around remote work, a lot of talk around technology and AI. And a couple of months ago, maybe a year or two ago, before AI was big, it was blockchain and HR. And that's not really the future of work, because people have been working remotely for a long time before telecommuting. I remember when I was a student back many years ago. When I was a student, I remember learning about telecommuting. Technology has been at the forefront for it, so none of these things are new. But from what I've read and from trying to wrap my mind around what the future of work is underneath all of these artifacts, I think there's a shift in power dynamics, and we can see it in the resistance against remote and hybrid work. You like, I can't go a day without getting a Google alert about some CEO saying something stupid about people have to go back to the office, otherwise they can't do their jobs properly, because they're just that's just the type of organization that it is. And so changing work arrangements challenges old power dynamics between the individual and the organization's key decision makers, and various other stakeholders. So there's a shift in power dynamics. There's an amplification in worker voice. And so worker voice is also not something new. We've known about unions and representation and all of these things for a lot of time, but these voices are now becoming much more pronounced. Organizations can no longer opt out of listening to people. It's simply not an option anymore, and there's various reasons for that. There's tangible reasons. If people, I mean, regardless of where you stand in what's happening in the Middle East at the moment, in Israel and Gaza, what you can't deny is the impact that people have had on businesses that they feel are out of line with their own beliefs. So the boycotts on organizations like McDonald's, Starbucks, they didn't listen to what people were saying. They're consumers, but the same goes for employees. Those voices are being amplified, and if organizational decision makers don't listen, that has material consequences. And there was a third thing now, but I forgot what it is. So yeah, so at the moment, I'll just say a shift in power dynamics and an amplification of worker voices is the future of work. There was something else. I have it on a list somewhere. Watch this space. I'll post a video about it.
For it. We will wait for it, Dr. Cliff. Alrighty, so understood on what the future of work looks like. So thinking about it and just talking about the people being a key component of this whole discussion. And I like the fact that you bring science into it. It's not just opinion based, it's actually science based. And you call it people science. So bring us to your page. Define what is people science.
So there isn't a generally agreed upon definition. So what I like to do is when I talk about people science is distinguish it from HR, so HRM,
Mm.
and industrial psychology. So it shares elements of both, and it is also distinct. So HR is very applied. It focuses on operational efficiencies. It focuses on compliance, um, administratively managing things, maintaining structures. And then also planning for the future and making sure that all the boxes are ticked. And if there are HR people in the room, they'll probably be outraged because the work that they do is more than just ticking boxes. That's not what I'm implying. But the focus is very much on establishing and maintaining structure. Then, if you look at IO psychology, it's a little bit more theoretical than applied compared to HR, and it's mostly about studying and understanding what is beneath the surface. So understanding, why people behave a certain way, why people have certain preferences, trying to use that to predict future outcomes like performance or group cohesion and these types of things. And so people science sits kind of in the middle because it uses theories and tools and principles of psychology, and it applies it. It's very much applied, so it's not theoretical. It's completely applied. It's evidence based, so it uses evidence from academic research, but also from industry reports. I use a lot of industry reports in my work because academic publications can not sometimes, always takes very long to actually become published, and so we don't necessarily have immediate information available. So it's very applied. It looks at specifically giving voice to people, doing it in a way that leverages technology, um, and focuses on creating spaces in organizations that's based on evidence that is best for the person. So you have to know what people first means to be able to use people science, because people science works towards achieving people first in a very applied way using evidence. I don't know if that
Alrighty. Thank
if that sums it up.
It does. It does sum it up, and it actually brings us on to discussing some of the topics that you have spoken of or created content, video content of on your LinkedIn platform. And I'll just go straight to the most what word do I use? Controversial one, if I could
Oh
call it
dear.
that way. Laziness does not exist.
Yes.
Please
Yes. So,
speak about this one and the assumptions we have about it, and
mm,
just walk us through it.
mhm. So first off, I need to say that this is not my idea. I didn't come up with this. Okay, so uh, psychologists and medical professionals and sociologists, they've been saying it long before I've said it. Ironically, assigning the label of lazy is lazy. If you have the okay, maybe I should take a step back. It it is not an accurate label. It is a label that doesn't dig below the surface. It's very reductionist, but it is not surprising considering the context that we live in, especially regarding work. Right, where everything that we do is a kind of a measurement of how much we can produce, right? So how nice my house is, what clothes I wear, what car I drive, what neighborhood I live in, what school my children go to. And sure, you can say, well, I'm not a materialistic person, but I mean, even if you're a super leftist liberal commie like I am, there's still this measurement of how much a measurement of worth based on how much you can produce. That that is embedded and normalized and institutionalized in organizations, and spills over into wider society, because we start at school. Yes, there's been generations of outrage about participation trophies, but I mean, after we've given a participation trophy, we're still assigning all kinds of achievements based on what people can produce, whether it's at school or at university or at work. And so if that's the core mindset, worth equals production, then of course, if you're not producing, that there must be something wrong with you. You're lazy. But assigning that label keeps you from understanding really why you're observing the thing that you are calling lazy. And unfortunately, there isn't just one thing. Okay, I mentioned specifically in this one book that I referenced by psychologist Devin Price. They mention specifically workload, level of autonomy, and there's a third thing. I don't know, wellness. I think well-being, but it could be a lot of other things. It doesn't necessarily have to be psychopathology, so it doesn't necessarily have to be something like executive dysfunction in the case of ADHD, or anxiety or depression. It doesn't have to be that. It could be something like work isn't meaningful, and this person has to go to work day after day and do this work that they don't find meaningful, and then they stop engaging, and then you say, oh well, you used to work so hard, now you're lazy. There could be conflict, there a myriad of different things, but laziness, the label of laziness that we've conceptualized and assigned to people, that does not exist. There are other things. And how can I say that? I can say that because there's volumes of research that shows that people want to contribute. People want to contribute to the group, to the team, to a functional society. I mean, if we didn't, then we wouldn't get bored. Because if we want to just lie around and do nothing, then we wouldn't get bored. So that in itself, is a good indication that laziness doesn't exist. So laziness is, or what we label laziness, is actually an observation of something else. And unfortunately, there isn't a short list, but I would start with the person and go, listen, what's up? I'm noticing this, and I'm not judging you. I'm just noticing this, and this isn't great for what we're trying to achieve as a group. So help me understand. And sometimes the person themselves might not even understand. Um, it might be an exploratory. It's not like someone is actively aware of why they're behaving in a certain way. It could be very much the person doesn't know. And so these conversations are very important, that they happen with empathy and without judgment and in a safe space.
Thank you for adding that, with empathy, without judgment, and in a safe space. So, listening to you, Dr. Cliff, then will it be safe to say that the assumption that there's laziness going on is indicative of a lack of balance somewhere?
That could be one. That could be one thing. So someone can be just plain exhausted. That's the other thing that Devin Price mentioned. Someone can just be exhausted, and that could be one thing. But it could also be many other things. They might not be getting along with people their group. They might be discouraged because they're not in a career that gives them fulfillment. They might not have enough opportunities for collaboration. Yeah, the list is endless, but definitely balance is one, a lack of balance.
Okay, alrighty. So, thinking about this, Dr. Cliff, you'd also spoken about the work life harmony versus work life balance. So, if we
Mm,
just flow from this conversation of evaluation of what could be going on with this person and thinking about it from, is it a work life harmony issue, a work life balance issue? What are your thoughts on this?
right. So I'm a proponent of work life harmony as opposed to work life balance. Not because there's anything particularly wrong with work life balance, but I just think that, especially now when we're seeing in the future of work a shift in power, amplified voices, I think it's important that we realize that people aren't just their domestic responsibilities and their work responsibilities. That dichotomy is too simple. We have hobbies. We participate in professional activities outside of the company. Just so for me, it's professional activities as a psychologist with other psychologists. Uh, we practice religious events or observances. So we are more than just a parent or a partner and a colleague. We've got other experiences in life as well. And the other limitation of work life balance is this assumption that both sides of the dichotomy takes energy. So we have to have a balance because we only have a finite number of energy, and work is taking energy and home life is taking energy, and we must make sure that the one doesn't take more energy than the other one. But that's also limiting because different human experiences can energize us. So um, for me personally, if I'm doing work that I love, which I'm very fortunate I get to do, I know many people don't have that privilege. I get very energized. I can come off of like a long day of work and I'm bouncing off the walls because I'm so energized because I was able to work with people who I find stimulating, inspiring, or I was able to achieve some. So this assumption that these different experiences takes energy is not necessarily the case. It can be the case, um, but it can also energize. And so work-life harmony is an alternative approach to work-life balance and assumes that we have different experiences, and what is key here is to harmonize all of these different human experiences into a congruent human experience, a life experience that assumes that different experiences influence us on it in a different way and influence us differently at different times. So we won't have the same experience today as we're having tomorrow. So that's the model that I adopt. It's not it's not as prominent or dominant as work-life balance. Work-life balance is kind of the dominant theme when we talk about wellness. That's a very dominant theme, but it is emerging and it is something that I subscribe to.
But I think I kind of agree with it, Dr. Cliff, because when you think about it, if my work is in harmony with my life and my values and all these other attributes that combine to make me the person that I am, then my probability, and correct me if I'm wrong, of finding myself in a situation where I am battling dissonance goes low, becomes very, very low. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I got
Yes.
it. Thank you.
Yes. No, definitely. And it's difficult because often when we have these kinds of discussions around work-life harmony or work-life balance and meaningful work. People who are scared of change and who are afraid of losing control. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I don't think people who are scared of losing control are bad people. It is what it is, especially if you've got a lot of accountability and a lot of responsibility. The knee jerk is saying, well, work can't just be, kumbaya sitting around the campfire and singing and holding hands. But it doesn't have to be like that. It feels like often when we have these conversations, we have to choose between sitting around the campfire singing kumbaya and having meaningful work, or the other extreme, hating my job because I just need to finish these tasks in a day and get through it. It doesn't have to be one of these two. It can be somewhere in the middle. But that is a difficult conversation to have, because there is that resistance when we try to discuss things like work-life harmony. But yeah, it's what you said in the beginning. These assumptions are hard to shake because they've influenced kind of our entire worldview.
That's true. That's very true. But again, the future of work, open to hearing what the future of work looks like. We could just be transitioning from looking at it from balance to harmony. I think one of the things the pandemic taught us was anything can happen. Having a
Mm-hmm.
fixed mindset does not work for anyone. Adapting,
Yeah,
evolving, that's the way to go. And
yeah,
speaking of the advent of AI, and one
yes.
of your videos, Dr. Cliff, you speak about AI becoming part of the team in the future. So maybe you can speak a little bit more about this as part of the future of work.
Yes. I mentioned this in some of my content. Every time there's a big technological advancement, there's this collective hysteria about how it's going to, change life as we know it, completely disrupt our way of life. And I mean, there's some truth to it, but there was hysteria around the radio. People were saying people aren't going to be social anymore. Everyone's just going to stay in their houses and listen to the radio. Or TV, people aren't going to read books anymore. People are just going to watch TV and not read books anymore. We know that that's not the case. We've got ebooks now, and people still buy physical books to read. It was the same with the internet. Again, no one's going to go outside. No, because now you can take your internet outside with you on your smartphone. And I mean, it's the same with AI. AI is not going to take our jobs, but who will take your job is someone who is able to use AI effectively for now. But in the very near future, I'm not a technologist, so I'm only reading this as other people are predicting it. But people are predicting that AI is going to become part. They're going to be like teammates, and that's going to be an interesting relationship, because I don't think AI is going to have the same. I mean, they don't have the same emotions or behavioral attributes or psychological connection, but we are going to have to kind of interact with them as they are a person. So that's going to be very, very interesting. For now, what I just say when we talk about tech is making sure that people understand, when we design work and design organizations of the future, AI isn't an optional thing. Just like now, having a computer and being able to send emails isn't really optional anymore. A couple of decades ago, it was optional. We use email or we don't use email, but now it's not optional. And it's the same with AI. We're gonna have to design work and design organizations that are taking that into account.
Alrighty, thank you for sharing that. The affirmation or reassurance, whatever adjective or word we want to use, it just says AI is not coming to take our jobs, but the person who will take your job is a person who can use AI. So thank you for sharing that. Then I'll just ask you one more question before I go into the
Sure.
messages to check the questions that are being asked. You actually, they've now become two. You had spoken about people analytics today. I
Mm.
think it's your latest video. So now that we have you online and live, please do speak about it a little bit more.
Okay, so I teach a people analytics course with CIOPSA, so the Society for IO Psychology in South Africa. I'm I'm actually a qualitatively trained researcher. So my earlier research, and well, most of my research actually, is qualitative methods, and I realized that I had a gap in my expertise, and I needed to be more proficient in quantitative methods and people analytics. And so I taught myself I was going to do a formal accreditation, but then I decided I've studied enough. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to teach myself. And that kind of that evolved into teaching it at universities to postgrad students. I yeah, I developed is a long story, but I developed something that was just a short course, and then someone said, "Oh, this is great. You should make it into a bigger course." And then I made it into a bigger course, and then eventually it ended up with Siopsa asking me to do it with them. So we actually run the course a couple of times a year. And so the course is specifically for people professionals, so HR managers or IO psychologists or psychologists that work in organizations who aren't data scientists. So this is not a certificate course that's going to make you a data scientist, because that's not the point. The course has got two key things. Uh, Either A, you are in an organization that doesn't have an analytics department, a dedicated analytics department, and but you would like to have analytics for your people function, or analytics that speak to people in your organization, and you kind of have to do that yourself. So that's the type of person that I can help with this course. Or option B is you are in an organization that does have a dedicated analytics department, but they're data scientists, so they know numbers and structures and data structures and these types of visualizations, but and data integrity and all of these types of things and algorithms, but they don't know people. And so if you want to have a seat at the table and be able to say, okay, I get that this is best practice in terms of data science, but I need you to listen to me about how this affects people or how this represents people. So that is the type of that's what we address in the course. And it's very practical, but it is firmly based in theory, because I'm a massive nerd. So of course there's going to be theory and research, but we take the participants. It's a 2-day course. It's fully remote, and we take the participants through building a database, data quality, making sure that you make ethical decisions, and we do visualizations, data dashboards, and all of that. Oh, and it's in May.
May of this year, it's in May.
Yes, the
Can you hear
14th. I
me?
think it's the.
Oh,
Yes, I can
mm,
hear you. It's either the 13th and 14th or the 14th and 15th. If you go to my link tree, it's one of the. So it's just linktree/Clif P. Lewis, and then it's one of the top buttons where
mhm.
you can sign up to the course.
Okay. You've actually answered one of the questions that has come in on how can anyone who's not in SA join the class, and you have said it is
Yes.
remote, and you have spoken on how to register for the class. So that answers that
Yes.
question. Alrighty. So last question from me, Dr. Cliff. What
Mm.
are your thoughts as far as the future of work is concerned and being people first organizations on leadership development?
Hmm. That's a very big question. And you would think after all of these years of research and leadership, I'd be better equipped to answer this question. Um, we need to we need to better equip our leaders to be vulnerable, to know that to know and to be able to admit that they don't know everything, to be able to challenge the status quo, to be able to be critical of their own assumptions, um, to promote distributed decision making, and to be, yeah, just to be more humanistic. We talk a lot about empathy, for example. And I find that in leadership development spaces, when we talk about empathy, it usually starts and ends with emotional intelligence, which is fine. I mean, emotional intelligence is definitely very, very important, and you can do a nice assessment. I love using the EQI2. It's a really robust assessment that I use in my coaching and leadership development. But empathy is about more than just emotional intelligence, and we need to do more around empathy, being able to connect with others. If I just look at my own development as a person, I've grown the most as a because I've been very, very, very privileged to have worked and lived all over the world, and with that comes exposure to people from different backgrounds, different professions, different languages, cultures. And the most growth that I've had as a person has been when I've been exposed to people who are different from me and being able to connect with those people. So empathy is incredibly important. I think the world would be a much better place if decision makers, key decision makers, had more empathy, and if decision making was a bit more decentralized, so more people had a say. I mean, if we look at the Western world, most countries are democracies where people vote for the government and the representatives that they want. But for some reason, in organizations, we don't do that. Isn't that wild? Um, where we live in democratic countries, whether or not our democracies are functional or not is a different conversation. But we live in democracies, but when we go to work, it's an autocracy. It's crazy. Um, yeah. So those are the things that I would focus on more when we talk about leadership development.
I think we know how we can already see what your next topic will be: voting in organizations as part of the
Organizational
future of work.
democracies. Yes, organizational democracies is an actual thing. It's a field of study. I'm very new to it. I've only recently discovered that it's an actual field. But yeah, definitely a lot
Mhm.
of potential for application in the future with, given the changes that are happening. Um,
Mhm.
definitely, I'll be doing more content on that.
Sorry. On this. Oh, I will be looking forward to it. And just
Excellent.
to combine all the questions that are being asked in different ways, how do we
Hmm.
reach you? For those of us who want to reach out to you, to
Right.
for people analytics, you have answered. But if somebody wants to speak to you on a one-on-one, or just get
Sure.
your opinion or your thoughts on whatever topic that they want, how do we reach you?
Sure. So I'm on all social media platforms at Clif with one F, P Lewis. So on all the socials, Clif P Lewis, you'll find me, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Same with LinkedIn. It's also LinkedIn / I think EN, and then my user is Clif with one F, P Lewis. Or go to my link tree. So those of you who aren't familiar with Linktree, if you're a consultant like me and you do like 5 million different projects, it's just one page with links to all of your different things. So you can also go to my link tree. So it's link. Linktree. I'm not sure where the dot is. I think it's before the double E, but it's Linktree / also Clif P Lewis, and it's got my socials, all my projects, the some research if you want to participate in some of our research. There's links there. There's the analytics courses there. So yeah, just Clif P Lewis, you'll find me.
Alrighty, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Cliff. I keep calling you Dr. Cliff. I think it's because that's how I met you as Dr. Cliff. But
No, that's
yes,
fine.
Cliff P.
I'm
Lewis
surprised that I've been
on.
able to go this far without telling you to not call me doctor. Just call me Cliff. Usually, that's the first thing.
You tried, but my mind refused. My mind registered Dr. Cliff, and I think you'll remain Dr. Cliff.
You're too kind.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time with us. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. And we recognize that this, in as much as you've given us all this information in under an hour, it did not take you under an hour to accrue all this knowledge and all this information. So thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Any
And
parting
thank you for
remarks
having
for
me.
us, Dr.
Thank you
Cliff?
for everyone. Oh, yes. No, I just wanted to say thank you for having me. I could talk about these things for hours on end. So I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts with you and with your audience. I know that some of my opinions are quite radical in some spaces. So thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for everyone listening. And really,
Mhm.
I'm not just being humble. I love hearing about other people's experiences and opinions. I think it makes me a better professional
Mhm.
and person engaging. So thank you, and I hope to hear from you and from your audience. I'm sure I'll hear a lot still from you, Noel. um, but yeah, I hope to hear from your audience as well.
Yes. Everyone who is watching, please do follow Dr. Cliff Lewis. I really need to stop calling you Dr. Cliff P. Lewis on LinkedIn and follow his content, the videos. This is something you can watch like on a daily in the morning when you're stuck in traffic or in the evening when you're stuck in traffic, and you get all this information with the guarantee that this is an academic who has done the research and is not just voicing subjective opinions but well researched opinions. So do follow him, do reach out to him for your consultations. And he's being very humble. He's forgetting to mention that he's actually a coach. So if you also need professional
Yes,
coaching,
yes,
do
I do
reach out to
coaching as
Dr.
well.
Cliff.
Yes, yes, that's how we met.
Alrighty. Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Cliff.
everyone.
Alrighty.
Keep
Have
well.
a good evening.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.